Welcome to the North Carolina Council for Social Studies Connections, a collective podcast for NC social studies teachers. Each episode features insightful interviews with experienced educators, curriculum specialists, and thought leaders who have dedicated their careers to enriching social studies education. Together, we'll explore best practices and tips for addressing the unique challenges that come with teaching the ever-evolving subject of social studies.
I'm thrilled to have you join with us today as we explore the fascinating world of social studies education throughout North Carolina. I'm your host, Dr. Travis Towne. Today we are joined by Bobbi Jo Taylor. She is the president of the North Carolina Council for Social Studies, and she's also a an ELA teacher, right,
Yes.
Bobbi Jo?
Mm-hmm.
She is an ELA teacher, but she's still involved heavily in the social studies curriculum at Wayne Country Day. And that's in Goldsboro, if you don't know. And we're just kind of continuing on our discussion of different strategies for our social studies curriculum. But a lot of times ELA, Bobbi, is it comes right together, right? It's like
Yes, it does.
hand in glove. And so you have a background in ELA.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of social studies teachers like me, I struggle with helping my kids understand comprehension and being able to help them. So what are some of the strategies? Talk to us a little bit about your history of getting involved in this.
Sure. It's interesting because I love English. I love ELA. I love the reading. I'm an avid reader, but I'm also a lover of history. And so I've had a background in teaching, middle school history, if you will. I've had a history of teaching in high school, as I've taught in many different private school settings. So I've had that experience, but I've had a lot more. They tend to push me toward ELA because of the slant that I had on my degree.
Okay.
So and my comfort level with teaching 6th through 8th grade. I can teach 6th through 8th, no problem. And not everybody has that. They have their specialty. And so with my love of history and with my ability to teach English and English skills, it was just a natural pairing that they would just kind of bounce me wherever they needed me. And I find that when I was teaching in history, I would teach the literacy skills that I would teach with my ELA kids, and it just depended on the year where I was needed most. And what I found is that and this is just my experience, that I'll see a history teacher and they're really good at teaching content.
Right.
They're really good at the content piece, but the struggle is they don't take it to the next level where they have the kids analyze and give back in the writing. And it's like they hesitate to touch it because it's not their realm of expertise. And again, this has just been my experience with the teachers that I've encountered. And I'm not afraid of that. If we're going to talk about World War II, we're going to talk about why it happened in the content piece, but now you're going to give it back to me answering the why. And I think that's the piece that we really, needs to be a little more pushed. And so I can do both and do both well. And so when I'm in my ELA classroom, if we're doing, let's say I'm teaching, To Kill a Mockingbird. And I know that's a banned book and not everybody has the ability to teach that, but where I've taught, I had that ability. So I could go back and build the background of, okay, we're going to talk about the Depression. We're going to talk about those pieces because the characters were, the author and the characters were all impacted by what was happening at that time. And if you don't have the background for that, you're not going to have an appreciation for the novel.
Right.
And so it really is it should be a natural pairing of ELA with history and social studies. And I sometimes think we are in our own little pod.
Right.
We don't connect with, okay, English teacher, can you tell me what you're reading? So, and when you're reading it, so that maybe I can tap into that when I'm teaching this particular era of history with my kids. And because I have kids that do that now, they'll go, oh yeah, we learned about that in history class. And I'll go, great. So now you have a better background for that. And now it helps you develop those deeper critical thinking skills, and you can connect with the material a little bit better. And vice versa, if I'm teaching a novel that is from that era, that they're learning in history, they can take that back to their history class or their social studies class, and they'll go, oh yeah, we saw that in Miss Taylor's class, or we talked about that. And by doing that, what you're giving the students a much, I guess, richer experience with being able to critically think.
Right.
And if they have an understanding, then they can actually explain. And that's where I think some of our kids, especially, they can read the facts off like this, but can they really dig deeper? And that's what we really want our kids to do.
Yeah.
And
so the cross-curricular thing, I think is amazing. I think that should happen all the time. As a history teacher, one of the things I find that are struggling is my kids are struggling with just comprehension. And I mean, even just reading, history is, especially in the high school level, I would love to have them read more case study or more primary document stuff, but I can't hardly get them to look at a page and go, well, I can understand some of the words. And so, can you give me some strategies if I'm, struggling with this? What strategies would you tell me?
Okay. Fair enough. Well, I would pursue it just like I would before we're going to hit anything in ELA. We're going to hit the vocabulary first. Now, I think we take it for granted when the older kids come to us, especially high school, they know how to read.
I know I do.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah.
So it's like, here, read this. But what needs to be explicitly taught, truly, is the fact that, you've got to introduce the material in a way, introduce the text. And I'm not saying pull out the text and go, okay, let's look at page 1. No, what you need to do is you need to engage them. Okay. So, all right. So, for example, one of my favorite activities was a jigsaw. And so I'm not sure if you're familiar with jigsaw, but and this was a professor in college that taught me this, believe it or not. And he just gave us a paper with all these words. And I'm looking at him. Now, I'm a very literal, logical, give me a purpose here. And he goes, okay, here you go. And he paired us up. And we're in groups, college age. And he goes, okay, tell me what these all have in common.
Oh, that'd be tough.
Right. And we're all looking at him going, I'm sorry, what did you just say? Like, what? He goes, classify them, sort them, do something with them. And, we're all, and of course, I don't think that way. So I'm just going, okay, well, all right, I think these two go together, and the four of us we're trying to figure this out, and we eventually, he gave us about 10 minutes, and then he said, okay, so tell me what you came up with. And so all the groups shared out, which is, again, you've got that think, pair. I don't want to say think, pair, share, but it was like that. So we kind of gave them our thinking. He said, so we grouped these words together because we thought they meant this, and so we gave them our thinking. And what that did was that introduced us to, he goes, okay, so all these words have to do with this is going to be what we're going to be looking at as a class. And what it did is it got our attention because we didn't know what to do with it, but he just let us do it.
Right.
And I think that if doing something like that in the social studies classroom, it introduces, so you do that just with the the vocabulary. And so if you're doing a particular study, the indigenous people of North Carolina. I was just looking at our history book for 7th grade. And so you take maybe the vocab and you take the people and you take certain key events and you put them on, you jigsaw them and you let them sort it out and just go, okay, so what does this tell us? What does this tell you about what we're going to be studying? And now you've hooked them.
All right.
And now they've got, and so that's something that is a very, very much an ELA skill because we do vocab and ELA. But for history, what you do is you take it, and it takes a little bit preparation. But what it does is you're going onto the kids' level, because how many of us have sat there and we give them the information?
Right, yeah.
Right. Here it all is, children. I'm just going to give you all this great information, and you're just going to take it in and process it. And that's not how they work.
But I want them to work that way.
Oh, I know you do. And it's not to say that they don't need that stuff, but I also follow up that with a frame of some sort. So if I know that there are key people, key vocabulary, key things that I want them to get out of this chapter, I make them a document. Now, for my 6th graders, I'll make that and I will do that. But my 7th graders, now I'm going to start to have them create their own based on what I'm doing, or better yet, I'll give them a more blank frame to fill things in. But it's a scaffolding. So with your kids, if you want them to get that information, first and foremost, you got to do vocab. I'm jumping around a little bit. I'm sorry. I'm just my head is full of knowledge.
Great.
But what you do is you introduce the vocab, and vocabulary is important. And it's not just you copy the definitions. It's literally a discussion. It needs to be a discussion because our kids don't have that base knowledge yet. So that's what you're giving to them. So it's a little bit more guided. Now, of course, I come from a very heavy middle school background, and even my 8th graders need that.
Right.
They really do. And I think by giving them, if they've got, and you can't take it for granted that they've had this solid vocabulary building experience previous to you. You can't take it for granted that they're coming in with everything that you need them to have. So it really does fall on us, even with your sophomores, your freshmen. They'll catch on a lot quicker than my 6th graders, I'll tell you that. But it's teaching them that, okay, we're going to do the vocab, and you can do different activities. I've done the snowball where they we put the vocab on crinkle paper, and then we throw them all at the front of the room, and then, okay, everybody get a snowball. Okay, so now go look up the definition. Okay, and now we'll talk about what these words mean. They're getting the definition, but you're getting them involved.
Right.
So
would you recommend from your perspective, like one of the first couple things, if you have a brand new class to come in and say, okay, here's some of the strategies that we use with vocab or with our just learning about how to actually comprehend the stuff that we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Vocabulary is key, because if they understand the vocab, that will do is that opens up the realm of they'll have a little more it'll make it a little more comprehensible when they do the reading.
Okay.
The other piece to this is what I do with my guys, and what I've done, and I wrote myself some notes here. You want to go through the text pieces. So,
okay.
All right. So nonfiction has a very set format. So,
Okay.
And I know your folks at home can't see this, but when you're looking at a history textbook, it's nonfiction.
All right.
It's broken up into subsections. So what you can do is just go through and just have them turn the subheadings into questions.
Okay.
So what it does is, okay, so now so here it's like what is the Compromise of 1850? Now you've got a question. Now they can go through and go, okay, let me write down an answer to that question based on the reading of the material they're reading. So what it does is it drives that ability for them it gives them a trajectory for what they're reading. Because I don't know about you, but just from college, just going through all that nonfiction, dear God.
Right. Well, and that's, when I talk about test taking strategies.
Yes.
And one of the things I always tell them is read the question first. You got to know what you're actually looking for within the main key. Because, for us, it is a lot of text of, if I'm in civics class, mm-hmm. I'm going to be reading some amendments, or I'm going to be reading some documents, for primary source documents, but I don't know what I'm reading for. And so I always tell them, okay, guys, find out what you're reading or what you're looking for before you read. So you're saying in the text, have your students look at the subheading.
Absolutely.
And go ahead and even write down a question.
Exactly. And base it right off the subheading, what the title of the subheading. Turn it into a question.
Okay.
And if they turn that, so now when they read, they can go, oh, okay, so if I've got a question I know I need to answer, now I can read. Now, for those students that struggle with reading, and we have them, they you've got a kid in 10th grade, he might be on a 3rd grade reading level.
Right.
It happens. The beautiful thing is there are so many tech tools that you can do text to, speech to text or text to speech.
Right.
There are, I think a lot of our textbooks, and again, my school, my textbooks are online, so they have the audible piece to them.
Okay.
But there's so much out there. So if
it'll change the Lexile level, right? It'll kind of adjust that. Okay.
And it'll read to them. So if you have an auditory learner, or maybe better yet, you read the text and have that as available as an MP4, and so that your students can can listen to it, and I don't know if that's a copyright thing. But most of your textbook providers might have the audio book available. And if you've got enough students with learning differences, and I mean, I've got at least 5 in my class that are identified, never mind the unidentified ones. The audio piece, I tell my kids, I said, look, if if reading it, if it's not sticking for you, go audio. I mean, and pair that with the reading. So sometimes, and I know everybody looks at me and go, wait, what? But the fact of the matter is, some of our kids need that support.
Right.
And,
even just to hear the word of what it actually sounds like.
Yes.
I know that's huge for me. Sometimes if I don't even know the word, I don't even know how to sound it out. And to hear somebody say it, it helps me to jog my brain. So you mentioned, when we were talking previously, you mentioned 2 things that I'll just be honest, I struggle with, note-taking and annotation. So
okay.
those are my 2 nemesis in my own life. I hate note-taking. And annotating is absolutely, it's tough because, just for various reasons. So tell us some strategies and why these note-taking or annotating strategies are important.
Okay. And I'm going to go on a limb, and I might get a lot of hate mail over this, but I tell my students, when we're talking about history, we're talking about, at the basics, we're talking about the people, we're talking about events, we're talking about dates, we're talking about vocab. So if you can break it down to those essential pieces, what I'll do is go, okay, events listed in the text. And just so when they read, so what you really want them to do is read it more than once.
Okay.
I know I'm crazy, right? You read it once, it's enough.
Yeah, I'm done.
But with the annotation, it really, all annotating is note-taking, but at the barest minimum, what you're looking at for history is you're looking at people, events, places, dates, vocab. And so in its most simplistic form, if you're reading something and you go, okay, and my kids did it. I did it with my 6th graders. And I said, all right, let's pull out your history book. Okay, so let's look at this paragraph. So if history is, if the content is broken down into these 5 pieces, tell me what you notice. And so just a paragraph, and they'll go, oh, person, oh, date, there's this. And all it is it's like a little, just jotting down those things. And now I'll go, okay, now let's go back and read it. And now that you've got these, let's see what we know about those things. Because it's not just, so once you're just getting those items down, and then you're going, okay, all right, we're going to talk about Winston Churchill. Okay, what does it say about him? And so and my thing is quality over quantity. So it's literally, okay, what do we need to know about, what is it saying about him? And what that does is it gives your students, if they do something like this, it gives them something specific. So really, you as the teacher, or me as the teacher, we're driving this bus, if you will. I guess we're guiding them.
Right.
So you really do want to give them a purpose for reading. So if you're going to say, I want you to read about X, you want to set them up for, okay, these are the things I want you to look for.
Right.
So if, you've got to be familiar with what you want them to read, and just say, okay, so it's going to talk about these 3 people or these 3 events. I want you to jot down 3 things that it says in the text about these particular people, events, whatever have you. You've got to chunk it. It's got to be in manageable chunks. And I know there's pacing guides, and I know there's standards and all of these things, but at the end of the day, you've got to give these kids we need to give these kids the support when, if they're going into reading, you want to give them a purpose.
Okay.
And nothing that, you can say read 20 pages and take notes, but at the heart of this, it's what do you want them to get out of it? Do you want them to be able to talk intelligently about Winston Churchill's motivations for this particular event? And I'd say he just popped into my head. Right. But when you're going into this, you've got to make it manageable for them.
Right.
And again, I speak from a middle school perspective. If you give them the right foundations in middle school, what happens that in high school when you're asking them to hit those upper level texts, when you're talking about primary source documents, they'll have a tool set, if you will, because that's what we want to give them as a tool set. So if they know that they're hitting dates, people, events, whatever in their regular stuff, then when you give them a primary source document, they're going to know to look for those things because they're going to see them in there. But the flip side of that is now that they've got that information, now you can ask them the deep questions. Okay, so why did Britain tax, why did they pass the Stamp Act?
Right.
So but they can't do that, as you said, if they don't have the comprehension. So you've got to help them build the comprehension by, okay, we're going to start small. Do your vocabulary. Now we're going to go in and you're going to frame out, here's the things that I want you to look for in the reading. And then they bring that back, and then you have an activity in class where they're working together. So they compare notes. So, okay, what did you find about this one? Then we collaborate as a class. Okay, what did you find out? And so I was a big one. I always had big chart paper all over my room. And I would have each of the things that I wanted them to focus on the chart paper, and then we would do round robin notes where they would go in pairs. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this technique. Yeah.
Yep.
So they would go in, and so by the time we were done, they had everything they need.
Right.
Now the beautiful thing about technology is now we can do that on Google Docs.
Sure. Or
And
any other
Padlets, and any of those technology tools, and now they have they've got everything they need, and now they can create that study guide from it.
Right.
But what that does then is it creates that conversation. Now they can come from a space of comprehension, and they've done it because you've held them up to help them get there.
Right.
And now once they've got that understanding, it makes this lesson, it makes going through the book and through the text a lot less intimidating. And once they've got a comfort level with the text, then you can go, all right, so now you're going into those primary source documents. You were saying, okay, so now my kids are going to be given a page of the Constitution. And so now they can go, okay, ding, people, ding, dates, vocabulary, go through and circle those unfamiliar vocabulary words. And now, okay, let's look at that. And so because they've been doing it with the I don't want to say lower level text, but they're doing it with their textbook.
Right.
Now you can bring in those harder texts, but it's I also use the Cornell note taking method. Yeah. And it's good to introduce at the middle school level.
Okay.
But again, at your basic level, you've got to guide them to what you want them to get from the text. And even at the 9th and 10th grade level, I mean, I don't know about 11th grade at that point. They're getting ready to go to college.
Well, but they would probably need that at the college level. So.
Absolutely. And so these are, if it's teaching them solid, listen to me, solid, solid skill set with tackling your nonfiction text. I mean, and you can have them go through. Now they can't write in their textbooks, obviously. But sticky notes. Yeah. Sticky notes. Okay, what are your vocab words here? And the other piece that I like to do, because I'm that crazy person that digs into literature and things, I'll go, okay, so we talked about this person. What do you think their motivation was for this?
Right.
And so now, but they can't answer those deeper level questions unless they, so these things that I'm talking about are really, I call them your rudimentary skills. Wow, it's the end of the day, I just say. And I also, when they have the content, what I also like to do is, we're going to go into the analysis piece. I like to present them with that crazy off the wall question. I'll go, what if America hadn't won the Revolutionary War? What if, or I'll do a compare and contrast. I'll say, okay, so we learned about this person. Tell me what they had in common.
Right.
And that's where you bring in the writing piece. It's literally, okay, so this is what they have in common. Now let's pull out evidence.
Right.
And then you go into your evidence and your citation, and then they explain what the evidence has to do with that. And I teach a lot of that with my ELA kids. And so if you're social studies kids, if you are working with these particular skills to, again, scaffold, start them with, okay, here's the vocab. Okay, here are the people, places, events that when you're in the reading, I want you to jot down 3 things. Give them something that they can handle. And most of your freshmen, if you say, okay, tell me 3 things about this. And again, there might not be 3 things, but whatever have you. But it's you guiding them where they need to be, And then what happens is you can eventually take the training wheels off and see what they do. Just say, okay, now tonight, over the past month, I've taught you how to do this. So now what I want you to do is I'm going to give you this section of reading. Show me what you can do.
Right.
And so when they come back and they've demonstrated that they've got that skill in hand, now you can introduce the harder text. And I don't know, again, if that would hit into the pacing, but if you want these kids to have that, you've got to give them the time to develop that skill. And it's like you almost have to slow down to speed up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. Sometimes kids, the Cornell note-taking method, that works for them. It should become a study guide for them. But at the very least, if you're teaching them the building blocks for how to understand the text, because at the heart of this, they can't give you the why if they don't have the pieces to go into that evidence, because they can sit there and say, well, this is what I think. Well, great. Can you prove that to me?
Right.
Show what in the text can you base that off of? And I know that seems like a literary analysis, from a novel kind of thing, but think about this. All of history is built on motivations of people, and we're all motivated by something. And so you can do that with them, and then the other piece is what's happening currently that is really, that the kids might have experience with or in their lives, in the news media, whatever have you. Let's bring in those current events.
Sure.
Because if they have a modern connection, then just say, this is no different. I always, when we talk about in the Revolutionary War time, pre-Revolutionary War, with the soldiers going into the homes and we're having to house the soldiers, that kind of thing, they're having to come over, and they were just arresting people for smuggling. I said, let's look at the Patriot Act.
Right.
From 9/11, and they'll go, I'm sorry, what? And I'll go, yeah, let me tell you about that. And then, things that are happening now or have happened modern times, there are roots, way back when. I mean, this is nothing new.
Right.
When I teach Shakespeare, we read Merchant of Venice. We go in and I'll get, now my kids, I give historical background. Previous to Shakespeare's time, he had no contact with Jewish people. And yet the whole play is based on the stereotype of Shylock the Jew.
Right.
And I'll go, all right, so let's talk about Venice. And I'll give them a picture of Venice at that time, and I'll go, tell me about it. And well, it was really crowded. It was this, it was this. But so pictures, maybe giving them a visual of something that has to do with the topic.
So all of that is literature or literature. Well, I know history is literature. It's all together. It's literature. I think I'm going to do.
I like that.
So as we wrap it up, we have new teachers coming into the classroom. We've got teachers that are maybe frustrated, just because they're tired, and maybe that was never something that they learned. So, what would be one thing that you might give to each of those? A new teacher coming in, or a teacher that's been in the classroom, experienced classroom, that's just struggling with these. One for each, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right, let's start easy with the newbie teacher. Literally, it would be pairing. It's if you're gonna at the basic, we're gonna talk about annotation and start with your vocab, and if you're going to teach a particular section, frame it out for them. Give them a purpose. So okay, these are the people, these are the things. So people, dates, events, and just put it on literally on a document, nothing fancy, and just say okay. Here are 3 things I want you to get from, to tell me about this, this, and this from the reading. Okay. So that's what I would do at the very start, because then they're reading with a purpose.
Okay.
And so they're not intimidated. For the veteran teacher, I think that's a little bit harder because they've been in the classroom. I think it just might be a matter of, okay, why are you, if they are going in and... I would always go to the ELA teacher. I would go to the history teacher. Actually, that's actually not a half bad idea. Yeah. It's pair up with the English teacher on campus and just say, hey, I want to have my kids. I'm having trouble getting them to even just read the one pager.
Right.
If you were going to assign this, what is one thing that I could do? Jigsaw. The jigsaw. It is. If you don't already do it, let me tell you, the kids love it because it's different and it engages. It's not a boring lecture. Not that all lectures are boring, but it gets them a hands-on experience. Get them, to get them in, hook them in, do that, or do, like I said, something. The snowball, I'm looking at my notes. It would literally be get them doing something initially to vest them into this, or better yet, have them, say have them do a what do you know, like a KWL chart.
Right.
What do you know? What do you want to learn? And be careful with the want to learn, because someone will go, well, I don't want to learn anything. Okay, well,
Right.
Okay, fair enough. But what do you know? And then if what they know is very little, just say, well, it looks like there's room to grow here. So we'll come back to that. But a KWL chart gets them vested.
Right.
So going back to your simplistic stuff, you would be surprised. What do you know about this? Or ask them an off-the-wall question that ties back to this. I look at when I do Shakespeare, I'll go, how many of you know people who have family who've gotten in trouble with the law? And they'll go, hands will go up, and I'll go, did you know that Shakespeare's family, was there? A lot of them were in trouble because they were breaking the law. And they'll look and go, really? I go, oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So something, off the wall is something like that to engage them. And then that will draw them in. And they like oddball stuff.
Sure.
So the KWL chart, the jigsaw would be for new and veteran. But for your veteran teacher, you want something, if you haven't tried Cornell Notes with it, a note-taking frame, even if you just give them those topics and give them a purpose for reading. I think that's relevant. I think, like I said, we forget that these students sometimes need to be reminded.
Sure.
So that would be where I would start. And if that didn't work, I'm that type of person. I'm like, well, that didn't work. Well, I'm going to find something else.
And search it out, right?
Yes.
And of course, listening to these podcasts are going to help.
Absolutely. Yeah. No bias there.
Well, Bobbi, thank you so much for talking with us today, because this is a struggle that I have as a history teacher, bringing in ELA stuff into the classroom. And again, thank you, guests, for participating in this edition of NCCSS Connections. You are our guest listening to us today. This is a collective podcast for North Carolina social studies teachers. And I want to express our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who joined us today. It's been an honor to explore the world of social studies education alongside such a passionate and dedicated community of educators. I want to encourage each of you to keep the conversations going. Connect with that fellow educator, like Bobbi has said. Connect with each other. Continue to seek new opportunities for growth and share your expertise with each other. Remember that you are a vital part of shaping the future through the minds of your students. And of course, be sure to join us for new episodes of NCCSS Connections, where we continue an exciting journey together as we learn, grow, and collectively make a positive impact on future generations of North Carolina students. Until we meet again, remember that you are guiding minds, shaping futures, and empowering tomorrow's citizens. So do it well.